We know that even in sunny Southwest Florida, the weather can change just like that.
Hurricane season is here, and with it, the possibility of strong winds, heavy rains, and dangerous storm surges hitting Southwest Florida. So we want to make sure that you're prepared.
We'll show you what it's like to face hurricane-force winds, how crews fly through hurricanes to get us the most accurate information.
Everything you need to know about preparing your home for the storm, and where to go if you need to evacuate.
For the next hour, we hope you watch closely.
Because on Fox 4, we're watching out for you.
We're on Storm Watch Southwest Florida. I'm certified meteorologist Trent Aric.
And I'm certified meteorologist Katie Walls.
No matter what develops this hurricane season, here at Fox 4, our goal is to make sure you're prepared.
And a big part of that is knowing what kind of season to expect. Every year, NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, and Colorado State University release critical forecasts that are used to size up what could happen between June 1st and November 30th. Here's a look at what we can expect this season. Once again, we are expecting an above average season. That's because of warmer than average sea surface temperatures plus La Nina. So what exactly can we expect? Well, in any given year, based upon climatology back to 1991, we typically see 14 named storms. But instead, Colorado State is predicting 19 named storms, and the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration is predicting 14 to 21. Of those 19, Colorado State is predicting 9 to become hurricanes. Of those 9, 4 are expected to become at least Category 3 or higher. Meanwhile, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, also known as NOAA, is predicting 6 to 10 hurricanes, of which 3 to 6 are expected to become major. So when we talk about major hurricanes, when we're talking about any type of hurricane, we typically refer to the Saffir-Simpson scale. Now, this solely looks at wind speed. It doesn't include flooding. It doesn't include the threat for storm surge. So keep in mind, those can be extra threats on top of these strong winds. Category 3, which is a major hurricane, that begins when sustained winds hit 111 miles per hour and greater. A Category 5, of course, the worst of the worst, catastrophic damage, but even a Category 4, producing sustained winds of 130 miles per hour, can also produce catastrophic damage. So what names can we expect to see this season? Well, we'll kick off the season with Alex, followed by Bonnie, then Colin, and Danielle. Last year, we made it all the way through W. And remember, if we do make it through W, an alternative list of names will be followed up. You won't see any Greek alphabet names this year. Now, these forecasts will be updated later in the hurricane season, so we'll be posting that information all summer long on Fox 4 Hurricane Center online. That's at fox4now.com.
There's a lot of work that goes into these forecasts, including looking at past seasons. 2004 was a tough one for Florida. Several named storms crisscrossed the state. That included Hurricane Charley, a Category 4 storm that took a last-minute turn towards Southwest Florida, charging on shore in Punta Gorda, just north of Captiva Island. Charley was a very small but ferocious hurricane, making landfall as a Category 4 storm, with winds near 150 miles per hour just north of Captiva Island on Cayo Costa around 3:45 p.m. on Friday, August 13, 2004. An hour later, Charley's eye passed over Punta Gorda, devastating the small town along with neighboring Port Charlotte. The hurricane then crossed central Florida, passing near Orlando. Charley was still a hurricane when its center cleared the northeast coast of Florida near Daytona Beach at midnight. Hurricane Charley was the first of 4 hurricanes to impact or strike Florida during 2004, along with Francis, Ivan, and Jean. It's one of the worst storms to hit Florida, and Southwest Florida took the brunt of it. Charley devastated Charlotte County before moving on to central Florida. The storm ended up killing 15 people. Fox 4 anchor Nadeen Yanes went back to one community in Punta Gorda and spoke to the 8 neighbors who not only survived, but worked tirelessly to bring their neighborhood back to life after the storm.
When Hurricane Charley hit Southwest Florida 18 years ago, it was a nearly direct hit here at Windmill Village in Punta Gorda, where then 454 manufactured homes stood. By the time the storm was gone, only 30 were left. Today, we're hearing from the survivors and the lessons learned all these years later.
We sat down with these 8 neighbors who lived through Hurricane Charley, and who each have their own stories of survival. And for Ray Rubin, it only took one question to take him back to August 2004.
Ray, if you had to sum up your experience with Charley in a few words to start off.
Unbelievable. unbelievable. Something that I don't want to go through again.
Ruben riding out the Category 4 storm at a friend's house, his wife showing.
And this is where we stayed during the hurricane.
How all 7 of them and 2 dogs hid in a hallway as the storm that afternoon took a last-minute sharp turn straight to Punta Gorda. The couple then coming back to what was left of Windmill Village.
The damage was unreal. I can't.
I know.
The houses were just rubble.
It was around this time, then seasonal resident Joe Strohmeyer got the call his home was destroyed and began documenting his experience in a diary.
I've got a section in this diary that I'm giving to you called Blood, Sweat, and Tears. We had it. Excuse me. I just felt so sorry for the people.
I asked if he could read a section.
I can't.
Instead, he kept it closed. Jim Book documenting those same personal moments through pictures, showing how homeowners spray painted their names and insurance companies on the walls that still stood.
I've never seen so much devastation of personal property, I don't think, in my life. Unfortunately, a lot of the older people couldn't afford to rebuild. They didn't have insurance on the homes.
For Janet McLean, she was working at the hospital, where from the 3rd floor, she watched as her home right across the street was torn from the winds that reached 150 miles per hour.
I watched my home start to come apart until all of a sudden you saw was white and debris flying through the air.
These 4, to this day, still apprehensive as hurricane season approaches.
Before, I really wasn't frightened. You know, it happens to other people. You never think it's going to happen to you. Changed my mind.
I just learned that I'll never stay for another one.
Now all offering this advice, even 18 years later.
I would tell them to prepare, have water, have food, have plans to evacuate if you got to get out.
Be prepared. When you hear, be prepared. Because we had nothing, you know, we wasn't expecting it. We was expecting it to hit Tampa. And then all of a sudden, boy, within a couple hours, it hit us.
Make sure you have enough medication for a couple weeks and make sure there's gasoline in your vehicles, a full tank.
I always try to be prepared because you just never know. And hope you find as many great people as we did.
In Punta Gorda, Nadeen Yanes, Fox 4.
Hurricane Charley was one of the few storms that hit our area where the wind was more impactful than the threat of flooding. Many people think that the strong winds that accompany these storms are the biggest danger, but today we're debunking that myth. Water is the biggest killer by far. Between 1963 and 2012, 7 of 8 deaths were from storm surge, flooding rainfall, and dangerous surf. That's according to the National Hurricane Center. Wind accounted for about 8% of lives lost in tropical systems. The threat of storm surge and powerful winds poses the question, when do you wait out the storm and when do you get out of town?
There's a catch-all phrase that can help you make that decision. Run from water, hide from wind. But what does that mean? I caught up with experts from the National Hurricane Center to help explain.
You look at tropical systems, the leading cause of fatalities historically is storm surge. It's number one. Yes, wind is dangerous. Wind could be deadly, with roofs and houses and trees, absolutely. But historically, it's the water. If you're in the path of that hurricane and you see the forecast is going to bring storm surge or flooding, you got to run. You got to get out. That's why we evacuate. That's why we get out of the way.
Water, not wind, is the #1 cause of death in hurricanes, which makes Southwest Florida extremely vulnerable.
It's the area I am personally most concerned about, not only because of the storm surge risk and its ability to push inland 20, 30, 40 miles, but because it's been so long since people have experienced the full wrath of a hurricane.
We were lucky in 2021, only having to deal with Hurricane Elsa moving along our coastline. But what happens if our luck runs out this year? What do we need to do if we end up in the path of a storm?
The risk is so great, when you're talking about a place like Southwest Florida, you can't afford to take a gamble and think, oh, the storm's going to miss me this time. Because if it doesn't, it could cost your life. It could cost your life of your family, your property, your possessions. You have to be ready.
The first step to being ready and staying safe is knowing your evacuation zone. If you're instructed to evacuate by emergency managers, leave.
Most important would be to evacuate outside of an area that could be inundated with storm surge, or if you're living in a home, like a mobile or manufactured home, that could be susceptible to wind damage.
If you don't live in an evacuation zone, sheltering at home with the proper precautions is safe.
Water kills more people, but make no mistake, wind is still very dangerous, especially when the gusts are strong enough to damage buildings and infrastructure.
That's why storm preparation isn't just putting up hurricane shutters and stocking up on essentials. It's also building homes and workplaces to withstand strong winds and flooding risk.
So what does it take to design something that can stand up to the strongest of storms? Meteorologist Andrew Shipley went to the wall of wind at Florida International University to get a first-hand look.
Using 12 700 horsepower fans, Florida International University's wall of wind can generate Category 5 strength winds and test infrastructure models.
What we can do here with our structures to be so realistic, to determine what designs are better.
Realism, FIU meteorologists like Aric say.
We love living in paradise, but living in paradise means we need to now be very smart and prepared.
Will help us all prepare for the future.
What rooftops are better? What attachments are better? That then translates to changes in the building code, which makes your home safer, my home safer, and then it makes all the residents safer. Rooftops, windows, doors.
It's that hurricane safety that historically translated in Florida to our building codes. Since Hurricane Andrew, the state's increased regulations to put to the test in 2018. Hurricane Michael was the first United States Category 5 to make landfall since Andrew.
What's left standing? The newer building code buildings. The other ones are blown away. You don't even see them left anymore. So quite visually, these recent events are just showing the work that we're doing here. The information and knowledge we're providing on better construction, it works.
It's not just a wall of wind here. Notice the flooding rain simulation. Salna says FIU is now working with 8 other universities and the National Science Foundation on an even more advanced simulator, including storm surge.
We can't ignore wind, but we still know too, storm surge is very dangerous. It actually kills more people than the wind. Now combine all the hazards of the wind with the storm surge and the wave action. And now let's see how structures can withstand that.
From seeing structure impacts to the impact of even stronger future hurricanes, Salna says the new simulator will replicate up to 200-mile-an-hour winds, which he says could come with a warming climate, already producing stronger hurricanes.
Hurricane Dorian, take that for example. 185-mile-per-hour winds that devastated the northwest Bahamas and came this close to South Florida. That's the kind of storm the new vision, the new facility will address. Looking for storms that may be stronger, slower, or wetter. That's the kind of future we need to build towards, that we need to be resilient for, that we need to have the science, wind engineering science, the whole science community on the front end of, not catching up, but trying to stay ahead of that so that we can be better prepared and more resilient with those new storms that come our way.
Preparing and getting ahead of future storms.
We can't rebuild to the past. We can't even rebuild to now. We have to rebuild for what the expectations are for the future.
Salna estimates for every preventive construction dollar spent now will not only help save lives, but dollars will be saved in cleanup efforts later on. At Florida International University, meteorologist Andrew Shipley, Fox 4.
More people are moving to Florida than ever, and that means more people will have to evacuate if there's a real threat.
You know, we don't know where they're going, but everyone here has just about equal vulnerability.
Is Florida ready for all the new neighbors trying to get away from a storm and find shelter? We're investigating coming up.
Plus, how prepared are you really?
A Fox 4 family invited us in to help them prepare. We'll see if they're ready and help you decide if you are too. September 10, 2017, Hurricane Irma made its 7th and final landfall as a Category 3 hurricane near Marco Island, with sustained winds of 115 miles per hour. The storm weakened to a Category 2 over Bonita Springs and later passed over Tampa as a Category 1. Irma was the first major hurricane to make landfall in Florida since Wilma in 2005. In Collier County, nearly 100 buildings were destroyed and 1,500 were badly damaged. Over 6 million Florida residents evacuated from the storm, the largest evacuation in our state's history.
We're talking a lot about hurricanes, but what about tropical storms? Tropical storms are named when their winds exceed 39 miles an hour. And many people think that because those winds aren't as strong, they don't have as much of an impact where they make landfall. But that's not the case. Extreme rainfall from these systems can be deadly. NOAA says that 1 in 4 deaths from tropical systems is because of flooding. So even if you're not expecting to see a full-blown hurricane, it's important to know your flood zone and never drive through a flooded roadway.
Getting your home ready for a major storm is a lot of work, whether you're staying through the weather or you're evacuating. That's why I went to one of our viewers' homes to help them get storm ready. We're just doing a little hurricane checkup. And what we're doing is just seeing how prepared you are for the season and really helping people at home get ready as well. So the first thing I like to ask people is, do you know if you live in an evacuation zone?
No.
I would say yes.
Okay, judging by the water in the canal.
I would imagine it's most of Cape Coral.
Yeah, and the reason I ask that, the first thing for everyone, is you can actually check pretty easily. You go to Lee County and they have an interactive map. This is your house, the black dot.
I guess we are.
More than likely, a stronger hurricane, you're going to be asked to evacuate, not necessarily because of the wind, because of the water that's behind your house.
Right.
Okay, good to know.
A lot of people make the mistake. They want to evacuate hundreds of miles or to a different state. All you have to do is evacuate away from the water, and you want to find friends, family. A lot of people think, oh, I'll go to a hurricane shelter. The county says that the shelter should be your last resort. Then you've got this beauty. And what do you do with this during a hurricane?
Well, so far I've been strapping it down, ratchet strapping the beams as well as the boat to the lift.
Okay.
Before we leave.
You get a storm coming up the Caloosahatchee hitting just the right way, we could see storm surge here 10, 15 feet. That's going to put water up over your lift.
That'll put it into the house.
Yeah, it sure will. So usually I always like to talk to people about the outside of their house, because one of the keys with hurricanes is not only do you have to run from the water, but you have to protect yourself from the wind. And we talk about that a lot. And it all starts with the windows, obviously. And you guys are set up. These are the electric roll downs, right?
Yeah.
Oh, you're fancy. You got the remote control and everything. Yeah, these are solid.
They seal up pretty nice.
You guys are in a really nice setup to where just in a matter of seconds you can close up the house.
Right.
And I noticed up top that you actually have some of the older style hurricane shutters, but instead of being the aluminum that you can't see through, you've got the clear ones.
Right, that way I can leave it up there and never take it down.
Jim, you mentioned a while ago that you still had some of the old style shutters on the side of your house. You've got a couple windows here that don't have the protection up. Do you know where those panels are at? Do you know where all the parts are at?
All the parts and pieces are in one stack in the garage.
One of the biggest things I tell people is you got to have a rehearsal, because when that storm comes, you don't want to be looking for your screws, your bolts, your wing nuts, or get half the panels up and realize you're missing some, because you want to be able to order those now so they get the supplies and you're ready, especially as we get closer to that peak of the season, which is later on this year. So we moved into the kitchen and we have to talk about hurricane supplies. Are you guys ready?
No.
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 What are you missing?
Probably everything.
Probably food and water.
Yeah. So what's crazy is this is one of the most well-protected houses I've seen in my 20 years of doing this, but it always goes back to food, right? What they recommend is to have a gallon of water per person per day for 3 days. So for you two, be 6. For a family of 4, it'd be 12 gallons. And that's the bare minimum, because chances are, if we get a bad storm through here, it's going to be more than 3 days before help could possibly get through. We have obviously the non-perishables, the canned goods, the granola bars, that kind of thing. And I know with the inflation and the economy right now, a lot of people are like, I can't afford the supplies. So what I always tell people, a good tip, when you go to the grocery store, you see the BOGOs, the deals.
Mm-hmm.
Buy a couple each time you go. Stock them up throughout the season, and then when the season's over, you can still eat those so they don't go bad. You guys are in really good shape for the upcoming hurricane season. Hopefully you don't see a lot of me on TV. Hopefully we don't see a lot of named storms, but Jim, Carol, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Stay safe, all right?
Thank you.
Likewise.
Something you may want to think about investing in if you're thinking about storm preparations is a generator. But it's important that you keep your generator working properly. Remember, you can only use your generator outside, and it's recommended that you keep it at least 15 feet away from your home because the carbon monoxide fumes can be deadly. Never use your generator when it's raining because you could be electrocuted. And don't add gas to your generator while it's running. And only use heavy-duty power cords that aren't frayed. Make sure you read through the instructions thoroughly so you know what kind of energy sources your generator can support.
I'm Lauren Petrelli, and with so many boaters here in Southwest Florida, we're getting a tour from the Coast Guard on how they prepare for storms, and also they're explaining why you should never try to outrun one.
Dwight D. Eisenhower was president in 1960 when Hurricane Donna slammed into the middle Florida Keys on September 10th as a Category 4 hurricane with winds over 140 miles per hour and gusts of 180 miles per hour. The hurricane plowed its way through Naples as it crossed the state on the 11th. Deadly Donna, as it was called, is the only hurricane on record to produce hurricane-force winds in Florida, the Mid-Atlantic states, and New England. In April of 1960, our nation's first weather satellite, TROS-1, was launched but failed to ever record a satellite picture of Donna because of an electrical failure that caused the satellite to cease operations in mid-June.
Now, the U.S. Coast Guard knows firsthand how extreme weather conditions can become dangerous for boaters, especially during hurricane season.
Meteorologist Lauren Petrelli went to their station on Fort Myers Beach to help explain why you should never try to outrun a storm.
When a storm comes barreling our way, the entire community has to prepare, and the U.S. Coast Guard is no different. They're taking us on a tour to show us how they get their preparations underway. It's a windy day at the Coast Guard station in Fort Myers Beach.
So we take our 45-foot boat out for any type of hurricane response if need be.
But that's nothing compared to some of the storms Petty Officer Diego Gonzalez says he and his crew are trained to go into.
So around his waist, he's got a heavy weather belt.
Gonzalez walks me through why this boat is meant to go up against monster storms like hurricanes.
We have little D-rings that he gets attached to. He can make a whole 360 around the boat, just clipping on throughout the way.
And inside, there are switches that can make this boat flip over.
This boat specific has a rollover switch, which kills the engines in the event of a rollover. Once the rollover is complete, you can restart the boat. Should be able to get out of any situation.
That's something that would be many boaters' worst nightmare. But Gonzalez says it's necessary training needed for this area.
Just living in this area, I deal with a lot of sailboats, a lot of people moving their vessels. Sometimes they think they can outrun the storm, which that's usually not going to happen.
The boat and crew are equipped to handle the nastiest of storms. But they're also a vital part of recovery after a storm hits. Gonzalez spent 2 months in Puerto Rico after Hurricane Maria, a Category 5 hurricane that devastated the island.
It was very humbling, to say the least.
He says there were times where something as small as a shipment of water for the community could make the whole crew emotional.
And just the fact that the crew stayed so close, working, constant days where you would go maybe have 2 to 4 hours of sleep, but working so hard to one goal.
Lauren Petrelli, Fox 4 News.
It's been 30 years since one of the strongest storms to ever hit Southwest Florida made landfall.
The valuable lessons Florida learned from Hurricane Andrew, plus
it used to be probably around $800 to $1,000. Now it is somewhere between $2,000 to $3,000 for the same exact program that you would have bought 6 months ago is 2 or 3x what it was. So that's the big impact.
Flood insurance is changing. What new emergency guidelines may cost you. This year marks 30 years since Hurricane Andrew made landfall in Florida. The powerful Category 5 hurricane blew through the Bahamas in South and Southwest Florida before breaking up over Louisiana back in 1992. At the time, NOAA said that Andrew was the first major hurricane to impact Florida in more than 25 years. During the storm, more than 250,000 people lost their homes, 82,000 businesses were destroyed or damaged, and the impact on the Florida Everglades was catastrophic. The National Park Service says almost all of the large trees in densely forested areas lost their leaves. Floridians, and about 25% of the trees were broken or badly damaged by the wind. The Park Service actually says a fourth of the royal palm trees and a third of the pine trees in the national park were broken or damaged.
Hurricane Andrew struck on August 30th, the first storm of the season. And August 30th is typically when we see hurricane season start to ramp up. But like Hurricane Katrina, more than a decade later, Andrew would be a landmark hurricane whose mark would be left on Florida for decades to come.
And it was just one storm. Fox 4 meteorologist Andrew Shipley tells us exactly why National Hurricane Center experts are urging you to prepare now.
We live locally. Even though the National Hurricane Center thinks about all the storms, any individual just worries about their neighborhood, or maybe their state, or something, a relatively smaller zone. And it only takes one.
That message, just one tropical storm or hurricane, can change lives for years, no matter how active the hurricane season, is deeply personal for National Hurricane Center meteorologist John Candelosi, especially the 1992 Hurricane Andrew.
We didn't have any storms before late August, and that was a really quiet season, only 7 storms the whole year. There was Andrew. So even though it was a quiet year, historically, everyone's going to say 92 was a dead year for hurricanes. Unless you lived in South Florida, then it was a year for the record book.
And now, 30 years later, Southwest Florida's population is booming with so many new Floridians. Candelosi realizes that many have no tropical storm or hurricane experience.
So we're dealing with a population that's quite mixed here in Florida. So, we're trying to do everything we can to educate people and let them know about the severity of hurricanes and what to do ahead of time, because it has been a while since we've seen a direct hit, especially in the southern half of the state.
For perspective, Southwest Florida has not seen a storm hit since 2017's Irma. 2018's Michael was the last storm that made landfall in Florida. Whether 2022 is your first hurricane season or not, Candelosi's message remains the same.
We live in the hurricane belt. It's sort of the price to pay to living down here. We don't know where they're going, but everyone here has just about equal vulnerability.
And with that equal vulnerability, it is important to prepare as if you might see a hurricane directly hit this season, no matter how quiet the last few seasons have been. I'm meteorologist Andrew Shipley, Fox 4.
We talk a lot about the dangers of storm surge and torrential rain, but standing water also poses a serious risk. That's why it's important that you don't wade through standing water. That standing water could be full of parasites and bacteria and can even contain human and animal waste. There's also a chance that animals like snakes and gators could be hiding in the water as well. And if the water sticks around too long, it can become a hotbed for mosquitoes, which could put you at risk of other tropical diseases. It's also important to remember that driving through standing water is dangerous too, because you never know how deep the water is and you could get stuck or a flood could sweep you away.
Florida continues to be one of the top destinations, not only for vacation, but as a place for people to call home. According to census data, more than 220,000 people moved to Florida in 2021, many from the north.
So if this is your first time going through hurricane season, we wanted to go over the terms that new Floridians need to know.
That's right. You'll hear us use these terms often when we're covering storms. If you hear us mention a tropical storm watch, that means tropical storm conditions, which are sustained winds of 39 to 73 miles per hour, are possible within 48 hours. Now, a tropical storm warning means those same conditions are likely and expected within 36 hours. A hurricane watch means hurricane force winds, which are winds of at least 74 miles per hour, are possible within 48 hours. And a hurricane warning means hurricane conditions are likely within 36 hours.
Where a storm is headed is crucial in knowing how to prepare. Good news is our track forecasts are getting better every year, and the cone is getting smaller with more accuracy.
So let's take a closer look. The cone of certainty continues to improve. As a matter of fact, it's improved by 57% since the year 2000. So in just 22 years, it's gotten that much better. What you'll notice is that the cone of certainty is now a bit skinnier. Now, what this cone predicts, it predicts the center of the storm. But keep in mind, those impacts, storm surge, flooding, rainfall, can extend hundreds of miles away from that center track. Now, the cone, days 4 and 5, you'll notice it spreads out a bit. Why? Because we have a bit more uncertainty the farther out in time you go. And I want to bring that up because when you see a forecast model beyond 5 days, take it with a grain of salt. Things can change very, very easily. I want to show you this particular example, a potential tropical cyclone. This is something you'll start seeing more of. Basically, the National Hurricane Center identifies areas of low pressure that are likely to become depressions, and they call them potential tropical cyclone. So you'll actually notice cones input on those as well as they continue to work their way a bit closer to home. So what happens if you're directly in the path of a storm and you don't have anywhere to go?
If you can't stay at home and you can't evacuate, sometimes your last resort is to go to a hurricane shelter. We wanted to check on whether our hurricane shelters are ready in the event that people need to use them.
So investigative reporter Katie LaGrone looked into the state of Southwest Florida's shelters, and here's what she found out.
With its long coastline and tropical location, the fury of hurricanes have become as synonymous with Florida as the beauty of its white sandy beaches. But while science and technology are making it easier to predict what happens outside during a storm here, we've discovered preparing for one inside is still posing problems for the hurricane-prone state.
It's hard to believe, but yes, that is the case.
Because parts of Florida don't have enough hurricane shelters for both the general population and those with special needs.
We do have some pockets of the state that have seen exponential growth where not necessarily the infrastructure has been able to keep up.
That's right. According to Florida's emergency management boss, some of the state's most storm-sensitive areas also have the worst hurricane shelter deficits.
There should not be a deficit, and we're working on that.
Those shortfalls laid out in this 2022 statewide emergency shelter plan report. In it, 2 regions of the state are described as areas of concern because of its deficit of general population shelter space. Florida's largest region, South Florida, and its neighbor to the west, Southwest Florida, both coastal meccas with histories of being battered and ravaged by Category 5 hurricanes.
We're always concerned about Southwest Florida. We're concerned about West Central Florida, that area around Tampa Bay, just a little bit inland going over into Central Florida.
The majority of our facilities at our shelters are school facilities.
During this interview just a few weeks ago, the director of public safety in Lee County told Fox 4 they currently have just 20 shelters to meet the needs of its population of more than 750,000.
We anticipate that number growing in the next 5 to 10 years.
Adding, as schools are built, shelter numbers will increase. Though the county repeatedly declined our request to discuss how it's currently handling its shelter shortage.
We've had a deficit for about 3 or 4 years now.
Miami-Dade's director of emergency management explained why finding shelter in the state's largest county continues to be a challenge.
The population has outpaced our growth in infrastructure, so the shelter capacity is always a concern.
Right now, Miami-Dade has just under 90 shelters it can open at any given time, most of them schools, but it's short over 5,000 shelter spaces.
That sounds like a lot, but here's some additional perspective. Hurricane shelter space like this school gymnasium isn't measured by size of building, but feet per person. In Florida, that equals 20 square feet, just enough room for a small mattress and a little extra personal space.
If demand outweighs supply, contingency plans in regions short on shelters include shrinking that space per person, utilizing other buildings not on the state's shelter list, or even sending evacuees to neighboring counties with more available shelters. It's a scenario public safety directors are planning for this season, as high costs of gas and inflation are more likely to turn people away from leaving town. But they warn shelters should always be your last resort.
Our evacuation centers are lifeboats and not cruise ships.
I would even go one better. They're blow-up lifeboats. There are no walls. There are no showers. Everybody's using one bathroom, if you will. You're 20 feet apart from the next person closest to you. It's not an ideal situation.
So have your own contingency plans to stay with family or friends before you seek out a shelter. While the state allocates millions of dollars to retrofit buildings to ensure they meet hurricane shelter criteria, it will still take years for the state to have enough shelters. I'm Katie LaGrone reporting.
To take a look at all the shelters that open during storm season in Southwest Florida, head over to our Hurricane Center. Just go to fox4now.com and click on the Weather tab. Floridians are buying a big chunk of policies through the National Flood Insurance Program. But this year, thousands of people right here in Southwest Florida are facing higher rates, and many could soon be forced to buy flood insurance for the first time. Fox 4's Chris Earl shows us what you need to know about flood insurance and also how it's changing dramatically this year.
Insurance isn't supposed to be exciting. It's supposed to offer peace of mind. But flood insurance, and who is required to have it for 2022, is already in the process of changing. Listen to this just for Lee County.
There's 22,000 structures that are going to now be in a flood zone.
Brian Chapman of the Chapman Insurance Group in Cape Coral notes the magnitude of what is called Risk Rating 2.0. This is in development and will require more people to buy flood insurance if they carry a mortgage.
The new people that are going to have to buy flood insurance on their house because they're now being put into a flood zone, and they weren't when they bought the house.
FEMA manages the National Flood Insurance Program with new maps, flood zones, and this new risk rating getting applied, and Florida's influence is easy to see.
If you're inland Florida, I mean, you're still only 80 miles from the coast, and there's a potential that there's flood zones from lakes and levees. And so, you know, a large, now if you translate that, that's just policies. If you translate the premium, probably more than a third of the flood insurance dollars come from Florida because our premiums are higher here for flood insurance.
There is a max increase 18% on how much more a person who already carries flood insurance can pay each year. But for people who are buying flood insurance for the first time, what does an average sized home premium run?
It used to be probably around $800 to $1,000. Now it is somewhere between $2,000 to $3,000 for the same exact program that you would have bought 6 months ago is 2 or 3x what it was. So that's the big impact.
This area is a little south of the Caloosahatchee and Fort Myers, Riverside Drive and Edgewood Avenue, modest ranch homes where neighbors told us off camera they are paying more. Redfin reports 88% of Florida policyholders will pay more this year. And for the people who are pondering whether or not to purchase flood insurance, Chapman stresses this.
We've got, hurricane season. You've got a 30-day wait to be able to buy a policy. You have to be aware of that, unless it's a loan closing or a new purchase. So if you're buying a new home and it's new to you, there is no wait. If you're doing a loan closing, there is no wait. But if you're just living in your house and you feel like this is the year that I need to buy flood insurance, you have a 30-day wait.
No one likes having to pay more, but perhaps staying aware of the changes with flood insurance can help soften the shock of higher prices later. Chris Earl, Fox 4 News.
If you want to learn more about the changes to your flood insurance or see what the risk of flooding is in your area, you can find all of that information in our Hurricane Center. Just go to fox4now.com and click on the Weather tab.
One thing that tends to happen when you're preparing for an emergency is that people try to take advantage of the rush to stock up on essentials and start price gouging.
Now that's when vendors raise prices for necessary commodities like food, water, and gas to insane levels. Along with food and water, ice, lumber, and shelter are among the other things that can be price gouged. But how do you know if a price is technically being gouged? You'll want to look at the price of a certain item over the last 30 days. If there's a large difference between the number you're seeing on the shelf and the previous price, that's considered price gouging. If you see price gouging in action, take a picture of the price tag with the item number, write down the product name, quality or size, and the name of the manufacturer. If you can, find proof of previous pricing like bills, invoices, or receipts. Then you can report that information to the state's price gouging hotline or send it to the Attorney General's price gouging app.
We've talked about doing everything to survive a hurricane coming ashore, but imagine flying into a hurricane on purpose.
It's like being in a washing machine on a roller coaster.
Coming up, we're taking you along as the hurricane hunters take off from Florida to track storms all around the world. Many people stay at home and wait out the storm, but sometimes that can be too dangerous.
If you have to get out of town, do you know how to navigate Southwest Florida's roads? We're driving our evacuation routes to show you the safest way out of town. Wilma was a massive and powerful hurricane. At its peak strength near Honduras on October 19, 2005, the storm had a central pressure of 882 millibars, the lowest ever recorded in an Atlantic hurricane. Its peak winds were 185 miles per hour, the second highest only behind Hurricane Allen's 190 mile per hour reading in 1980. At one point, the eye of Wilma was 24 miles wide. The storm eventually made landfall in southwest Florida near Cape Romano at 6:30 Monday, October 24th as a Category 3 hurricane. The eye crossed the Florida peninsula in less than 5 hours, moving into the Atlantic just north of Palm Beach as a Category 2 storm. Wilma was one of 14 hurricanes that formed during the 2005 season. Up until last year, that was the most active in history.
A Category 1 hurricane is no big deal, right? Wrong. Experts say that even solidly built homes can be damaged from 74-mile-per-hour winds. This includes shingles and siding. Plus, winds of that magnitude will down trees, leading to power outages. Even in a Category 1 hurricane, be prepared to be without power for at least several days. If you do need to leave southwest Florida ahead of a storm, you'll need to know how to get out of town quickly and safely.
I took the Storm Fox out on the roads to see what the recommended evacuation routes look like and whether there's ongoing construction projects that could delay your departure. If you're driving around southwest Florida, it's booming. It's one of the fastest growing places in the country. Everywhere you look, there's new developments, new houses, construction. A lot's changed in the last few years.
2017 was the last time that we had a significant storm in Lee County with Hurricane Irma. And since then, we've had a lot of growth in the county, not just growth with infrastructure, but also a lot of people have moved to the county.
Since Hurricane Irma in 2017, Lee County has grown by almost 100,000 people. Many, they've never been through a tropical storm or a hurricane. All those people, well, that brings a whole nother set of challenges.
With more people needing to be evacuated out of an area potentially, that will put more people on the roads. And again, that's why we encourage people to have that solid plan in place. So if you know that you're just needing to drive across the county to stay with a friend or family, that's going to be a shorter commute than you necessarily trying to leave the state.
Evacuation routes like this one, they're critical in getting people out of harm's way and away from the water. Now, most evacuation routes in our area move to the east and then off to the north away from the Gulf. Now, one thing that will help ease some of the congestion is the timing of hurricane season.
Do you know that the hurricane season does happen outside of our typical tourist season? So that does help us. We know that we don't have as many visitors during that time period.
Another issue, it's the ongoing construction here in southwest Florida. And one area to watch, it's right here in front of us. This is I-75 and Colonial Boulevard. That a Virgin Diamond project isn't expected to be completed until 2024.
So we do have a lot of construction projects going, which once complete, will help us with getting people moved more quickly out of the area. So I would, pay attention. If you're on a morning commute and you know that there is a traffic pattern that normally does get congested, maybe, use an alternate route or just leave a little bit earlier.
Lieutenant Greg Bueno of Florida Highway Patrol says they'll be ready as well.
We're out there clearing the interstate, basically. We're removing any disabled vehicles, obviously any crashes. We're sweeping all lanes, including the emergency lane, because we may have to open that up for an additional lane of traffic.
As you're developing your plan this year, know where your local shelters are. Know where you're going to seek refuge during a storm. Maybe it's inland with friends or family. Just remember, you only need to evacuate tens of miles, not hundreds of miles. That way you can get back quickly. For Fox 4, I'm meteorologist Trent Aric.
Kermit has gone through 134 hurricanes. It's not just a lot of history, it's also a lot of research. The NOAA Hurricane Hunters gave me a tour to better show me the tools of the trade.
Slicing through the eye of a hurricane. It's a scary job, but it's one that NOAA's hurricane hunters take on every year.
Fox 4 meteorologist Lauren Petrelli met with the crew to better understand how they get the job done. Lauren?
Walking along this aircraft, you can immediately tell it's more than just a plane. And I got a one-on-one tour with the hurricane hunters who showed me how it's decked out with technology to better keep you safe.
Safely on the ground,
Kermit is one of our WP3D Orions.
NOAA's Jonathan Shannon shows me how almost every inch of Kermit is decked out with tech.
So right over my shoulder here is this black area. That's where the nose radar is. That's the one that the pilots are looking at in order to see the convection or the turbulence that they'll face up in front of them.
Just below it is another tool.
And that is a more powerful radar.
The multimodal radar.
That looks from where we are at flight level all the way down to the surface of the ocean.
The tech isn't just on board the plane.
We were talking about deploying devices to feed back more data. This is one of them.
It is. This is a dropson. So this is about the size, a little bit bigger than a Pringles can, about the size of that. But inside it's packed with science. So that sensor there will get temperature, pressure, humidity, and then it's got a GPS device in it that helps us get wind speed and direction.
Then the devices will feed back data that looks like this. As you can imagine,
it's like being in a washing machine on a roller coaster.
It isn't always a smooth ride to get that information. Hurricane hunter Ellen Haug says there is a lesson to learn from every storm and every flight.
Is there a story behind that from last season?
Hurricane Sam, yeah, it was one that we hit a big bump and everything went flying. I didn't realize I had so many things with me until they were laying across all over the tube. So yeah, that was an eye-opener, and that you can't take these things lightly and make sure you follow procedures.
And even though Kermit has been through many hurricanes, including Irma,
even though it's been through so many and we've been, very safe over our history,
Shannon says NOAA's hurricane hunters and crew members train all year to not only stay safe, but continue to collect that life-saving information from inside the storm. Lauren Petrelli, Fox 4 News.
We've given you a lot of information over the past hour, but don't worry, it's all available at our website.
That's right. You can find all of these stories, tips, and real-time forecasting on our website. Just head over to fox4now.com. Click on the weather page and then click on the tab that says Hurricane Center. You'll see all of our reporters' coverage, and you can get real-time updates on the weather from our expert team.
You can also use your phone to get all these updates as well. To download our app, just search WFTX in the App Store. And you can reach us on social media platforms as well. Take a look at your screen. We have all of our media handles up right now.
And if you have a Roku, Apple TV, or Amazon Fire Stick, you can watch us on there as well. Just search WFTX.
From preparations to the moment the storm hits and through the cleanup process, Fox 4 is ready to respond to hurricane season 2022.
We'll be with you on TV and your phone the minute a system develops and long after the final rain bands move through.
And if you ever have questions about what to do, it's all in our Fox 4 Hurricane Center online.
Are you watching yet?
Because at Fox 4, we're watching out for you.